once said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. See, many people think that fairy tales are just a simple form of entertainment for children, when actually they have great benefits to the child's development. I have done research on the original fairy tales like those by the Brothers Grimm, as well as more modern versions by Disney. I have also done research on the benefits that these fairy tales bring to children's development by reading articles by Sheila Cooler and Lisa Belkin. Introducing children to fairy tales, specifically the original versions, and continuing to use them when they're older help in developing a good child. First, I'm going to talk to you about the harms of watering down the original stories. Second, I'm going to talk to you about why they are watered down. And lastly, I'm going to talk to you about how we can change that and the benefits of changing. See, many Disney adaptations are very watered down, leaving much valuable information out. And this helps in creating the idea that fairy tales are simply just for kids to entertain them. Great examples of this are stories that we all know, like Cinderella. We all know the lovely Disney version. She fits into the slipper and gets the prince. But in the original version, both her stepsisters, when trying on the shoe, one cut off her toe in order to fit in, and the other cut off her heel. Then, when Cinderella is happily married to the prince, her stepsisters try to get back into her good graces. But instead, her birds fly down and pluck out an eye from each sister. Another great example is the original story of The Little Mermaid. We all know the Disney version of beautiful Ariel who loses her voice to see the prince she loves, and in the end they live happily ever after. But in the traditional version, not only does she give up her voice to go on land, but every step she takes feels like she's walking on glass. And in the end, the prince marries somebody else. Just after they are married, she's visited by her sisters, who have cut off all their hair and sold it to the same sea witch, who gave them a knife. Now the Little Mermaid has a choice to make. Does she kill the man she loves because he married someone else, and in return get her tail back and gets to go live with her siblings? Or does she choose not to? The Little Mermaid chooses instead to jump into the ocean, forfeiting her life and turning into foam, showing that true love doesn't always mean you get the person that you love. It means loving them enough to let them be happy. Now, many adults don't like these more scarier versions of fairy tales for their kids. Lisa Belkin actually took a poll of 30,000 parents, 50% of which said that they would not read their children these fairy tales until they were 5 years old. 20% of those said that the older versions were politically incorrect, and 17% said the stories would give their kids nightmares. Now that I've just discussed the problems of watering down fairy tales and lessons that we miss, I will now discuss with you why they continue to be watered down. Originally, these watered down stories were a movement towards lighter themes, happy endings, and of course, in Disney's sake, fitting a G or PG rating in film. But that still, as I explained earlier, leaves out many of the valuable lessons. And these watered down versions lead to the incorrect idea that fairy tales are simply just for children. Now, many studies have been done on why fairy tales are not just for children. A great example is that the author Tolkien once gave this lecture on fairy stories. And Miss Povo wrote an article discussing why him and many other great authors believe the same thing. She says, at the crux of his argument, which explores the nature of fantasy and the cultural role of fairy tales, is the same such thing as writing for children, that there is no such thing as writing for children. Now that I've discussed with you why this continues to be a problem, and how it leads to a wrong thinking, I'm going to discuss with you how we can fix it and the benefits. Fixing this problem would give us many benefits in our culture. An example is from a piece that Cooler wrote, where she says, quote, "The appearance of a villain allows the child to freely project his own violent feelings on those separate and satisfyingly wicked beings. Unable to express anger or hatred directed towards those adults on whom the child depends, he or she can displace this natural aggression and give free rein to it personified by the villain, either the stepmother, the wicked wolf, or the witch." End quote. She also comments on how good and evil is very black and white. There is no gray, making these things very easy for children to understand. Now, we can all take very simple steps. One large step that can be taken is implementing fairy tales into all levels of school and introducing them to children over and over again. Another more simple thing that we can do is start reading fairy tales again ourselves. And when we have kids of our own, or maybe younger nieces or nephews or cousins, we can read these fairy tales to them. Right here I have included links to a couple sites that show or they have these traditional versions. Now, as I have shown you, introducing kids to fairy tales, especially the original versions at a young age, and continuing to use them when older help in raising a good child. I showed you the harms that are present when we water them down. I showed you how and why they are watered down and how it leads to a wrong thinking. And I have just shown you the changes that we can take and the benefits that they'll bring. And I started with a quote from Einstein, but he also said something else concerning fairy tales. He says, "When I examined myself and my methods of thought, I came to the conclusion that the gift of fantasy has meant more to me than any talent for abstract or positive thinking." This shows that even the best and brightest of us still see the value in fairy tales. Thank you.